Hello there, welcome to this episode of Her Associates. I'm your host, Hinda Hashi. Now, according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being where an individual realizes his or her own abilities in order to cope with the normal stresses of daily life. Now, mental health is the emotional, psychological, and social well-being and is an important aspect in all stages of life, from childhood all through adulthood. Now, my guest today is a psychologist. Her name is Asma Dhamac. She runs an initiative called Sirta Maanka here in Hargeisa, which deals with mental health awareness and psychological issues. Welcome, Asma.
Thank you, Amina, for having me here.
Thank you. Why don't you tell us more about yourself, first of all?
Absolutely. So my name is Asma. I'm known as Asma Dhamac. I'm one of the young people who came from abroad. 5 years ago, I moved back to Hargeisa. And ever since, I was mostly involved in mental health and advocacy and learning more about it. And yeah, ever since, I'm in the mental health field.
Why psychology?
Well, it's a long story, but long story short, frankly, two reasons. The first reason is in my high school, we did something that's called career counseling. And I remember my school psychologist, therapist that was in the school, she gave me these papers that everybody was filling out. And then one day she called me and she said, Asma, what do you think of psychology? I never knew what was psychology. It was literally, it was like a new word that I never learned of. And I went back home and I searched it. When I realized the meaning of it, just like the way how you define it just now, it was something that was really inside of me that I was really looking for. Learning about people's emotions, thoughts, why do people do what they do. It was something I was always interested in since I was a young person. And another reason was my parents, alhamdulillah, they used to bring us back home. So even though we used to live abroad most of our times, but we used to also come back home sometimes. Since I was a child, I used to see Somalis, people who are walking on the street and kids are throwing stones at them or people are calling them names. Yeah. And I used to always ask myself, what happened? Why are these people different from us? Mm-hmm. I never find the answer till I grew later on and understood that these people are suffering with mental illnesses. And it really made me sad to see that no one is out there to help them out or even at least do something for them.
Addressing the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was also another reason that made me go for it and learn, be in this field. Yeah.
Why don't you, as a psychologist working in the Somali community, if you could please give us a brief picture of what the mental health society looks like, or what mental health looks like here in Somaliland?
Frankly, a lot of us could say that people don't know anything about mental health, and I could say mostly 90% of people are like that. Mm-hmm. They don't know even the term. They don't know what mental health is. They don't know that there is something called equivalent to physical health. There's also mental health. The same way someone, if they have a scar on, they go on to a doctor and then they, bandage it, right? The same way someone needs as well a doctor to bandage their mental issues. Many people don't see that as an issue. Mm-hmm. So I would say the state of it is that although alhamdulillah for the past 5 years, I can see that doctors are coming back to their countries and kind of helping out people. But still there's that lack of information or lack of knowledge about entirely what mental health is. So even people put it as myth most of the time. They kind of make it as someone has evil spirit on, or maybe they have lack of faith, or so many other states they use. So you can see that people don't have much knowledge or much education about exactly what mental health is.
Education, we would say that it's the education, because if you're educated in something, then you know how to identify it, how to deal with it. So as you mentioned, most mental issues are blamed on a lack of spirituality, can we say, or religion. And for those who do know about mental health, is it still considered a taboo subject to be spoken about in the community? Is it still something that shouldn't really be spoken about? Is that what most people feel like?
That's a good question. I would say I would say two ways. You know, people know about mental health and they don't know about it at the same time. Most of the time, I start conversations with people. I talk to people, you know, military, police people, mothers, children, educated young people. And every time I speak about mental health, because I always bring this topic out to anyone that I speak with, anytime I bring out this topic to them, they seem to know that something is off. They seem to know that mental health and entirely psychology is important. Yeah. But at the same time, when they're in groups or when they're out there in the community, it's the opposite. They act like they don't know anything about it. They act like this thing doesn't exist. They ignore it. So you can see there's a lot of taboo, of course, and I can understand. It's very understandable. Why? Because if someone comes out as mentally ill, or someone comes out as someone who is, for example, severely depressed, they will be highlighted in the society
and
as
marginalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They will be called names. They would never be considered to be a normal human being that can make decisions, that can live their life, even though they have mental issues. Yeah. So people tend to kind of sit back and hide behind those actings they do. Yeah. They'll be like, oh, you're sick? Oh, that means you're crazy. Yeah. You know, mentally ill is equivalent to being crazy.
Yes, to being crazy, yes.
Yeah.
And so tell us more about your initiative, Sirta Maanka, and you carry out group therapy as one of the aspects of your initiative. What does group therapy entail? And do people find it, like we spoke about, people finding it hard to speak up about the problems they might be facing, their mental health issues? Do people find it easier to open up when in a group setting, or is it harder for them to open up?
About Sirta Maanka, this initiative, I started about 3 years ago, and I started with just educational videos speaking Somali. It was challenging, of course, because so many terms in English are not in Somali. It's kind of hard. But I started 3 years ago to start a sort of advocacy and bring awareness to mental health. Small things like depression, stress, or any other illnesses. Later on, I discovered that maybe I can add another activity in this initiative, which is the group therapy that you mentioned. Yes. Frankly, we did our first trial about 2.5 years ago. It was me and another woman. Her name was Ifrah. Yes. So usually group therapies, you have to have 1 or 2 therapists leading it. So at that time, I was not officially a therapist, so I had help. And we said, let's try. Let's see kind of how would people react? How would people see group therapy as? And we started with mothers with children with disability. Okay. So at that time, we were working with this organization that had, they used to register children with disorders or disabilities. So we were like, let's do for the mothers, since they all have common problem. Yes. So basically, group therapy is you bring people together who have common issues or common problems. So we were like, let's try for them and see how things go. It was tremendously successful. Alhamdulillah, we continued for 6 weeks, and it was very helpful. Well, all the mothers, they were there for each other. Yeah. They kind of felt a sense of relatability and they helped each other a lot.
Which is quite important in aspects of life such as that, to be able to feel like you're not alone and someone is going through what you're going through.
Absolutely. They give advice to each other. Some of them even become really close friends. Yeah. So then we saw how effective it was, and I bring it back again. I started again another group therapy this year, October. And as the question you mentioned earlier was, do people find it hard or easier to share? I would say people find it easier to share, because if one person speaks up, the others also speak up. Yeah. They just want someone to talk for them. Yeah, absolutely. I am going through problems. I have depression. Yeah. I might feel ashamed about it or even not talk about it. Yeah. But if I hear you talking about the symptoms, I'll be more than happy to speak about it. I'll be like, yes, I go through that.
Yeah. It's comfortable. It's very comforting.
Absolutely. And I would even sometimes share the coping mechanism or what I do in order to relieve myself. Yeah. And just even that can help someone else try what you did. Mm-hmm. So people really find it easier, and hopefully we're looking forward to do more group therapy so that people would make use of it more.
You deal mostly with women, don't you? Women in the society, Somali women. Maybe if we can talk about a little about postpartum depression, which I don't have all the information, but I'm pretty sure is a big issue in our community. especially with the lack of awareness, the lack of knowledge. So if maybe you can highlight a little bit on that.
Absolutely. To be honest, I always focus in Sirta Maanka, the initiative I do is mostly I focus in everyone basically, children, male, women, male, female, everyone. But you're right, females tend to have more problematic issues in the community. One of them is postpartum depression that you just mentioned, and there's also called baby blue. It's also another term for it. This condition is mostly about almost 80% of women happens to these conditions. Although in research they say 20 to 30%, but most females face these issues, and it's all because it's a new world. She's a new mother. She doesn't know what's going on. She's going under physical changes, emotional changes. A lot of changes are going through her. So the only thing that really escalates that, it's if the community that is surrounding the mother does not understand what's going on with her. Because the number one thing that the mother wants, especially new mother, it's support. And that support has to come from her husband, has to come from her family, has to come from her friends. So if she does not find that support, her problem escalates. And even some mothers, they reach to a level where some of them even wants to suicide or kill themselves, or even harm the child. Exactly, harm the child. I mean, in Somali, they actually call Warar. Warar. I happened to learn this phrase a few months ago, actually. And it does actually exist. And alhamdulillah, I really see as a Somali community, we do have the support. Families support each other. It's just slightly what's missing is there. It's them not knowing her condition.
Again, awareness and education.
Absolutely. So support would not only be as effective if you do not understand what's going on with the mother. For example, the mother would act out, she will be irritated, she will maybe do some actions that she never has done. And the parents or maybe her community that's helping her will say, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting this way? We're here to help you, we're taking care of the baby, why are you acting this way? So a judgmental will come into place, and a misunderstanding, and also invalidating her emotions in that moment.
Which is quite wrong.
Which is very, very risky for her. So in this kind of condition, I would say, of course, families and community who are supporting the mother has to be educated on what postpartum depression is. Because it exists, but it's not there at the same time.
What are some of the ways you, as a psychologist, address the issue both with the mothers and their families?
The mothers and their families is mostly, to be honest, postpartum depression and pregnancy, because it's a life-changing situation that especially a woman could go through. Even marriage. It's a very risky and it has its own problems and responsibilities. So someone to be ready for it and someone to just be in it and then starts to learn from it. It's better for the person to first learn, understand, go through the basically. I think there's a pre-education other people in the world do. But we don't have it here. We just throw the person in that life and they just happen to be shocked. What's going on? My life, it's not the same as it used to be before.
Do you perhaps think that as a remedy or as a solution to tackling this problem, I mean, it's not something that can be eradicated, it's natural, postpartum depression comes natural, but do you think as maybe a solution to this would be to have psychologists on hand at hospitals to deal with pregnant mothers and mothers who've just given birth?
Absolutely. That's a very, very crucial thing, because so when a mother is going through postpartum depression, there's 3 things she would need, because of course that determines her stage of the level she's in. But 3 things are very important. Number 1, we spoke about the support that she needs, very important support. I know most of the time there's no husband support is not there. There's always the mother and the siblings and the friends, but all of them are important. The second one is medication. The mother needs medication in order for her to be stabilized, and for her to be able to kind of slow down these neurotransmitters and these hormones that are going on.
So antidepressants?
Antidepressants, and there's other medications that doctors usually, the psychiatrists or the medical doctors prescribe. And the third one that the mother would need also is very important is therapy, counseling. It's very crucial as well for her to understand, and that would actually help her that it's okay to feel this way, and maybe healthier ways to deal with or to live with she needs. Medication is there to stabilize her, but they're not entirely something that can solve her problem. Yeah. So therapy is also important, and therapy, if she needs therapy, there needs to be a lot of people who are psychologists and therapists to be in there.
People who are able to handle this. Okay, we're gonna go on a break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, in the studio with me today is Asma Dhamac. She runs an initiative called Sirta Maanka here in Hargeisa. She's a psychologist, and she's just been giving us information or telling us about what the mental health picture, here in Somaliland looks like. Asma, welcome back.
Thank you.
So as a nation that has experienced war, many of our citizens are victims to, let's say, PTSD. You mentioned earlier coming to Somaliland and seeing, people just like walking on the streets and being marginalized, children throwing rocks at them, they look homeless. But with most of these people, there's an underlying story. There's a reason that they are the way they are. And we have the ones who are on the streets, and we have the ones who are kept in their homes by their families. These are people who've been through the war, something that's not very easy psychologically, mentally, even physically. What advice would you give to people or individuals who have family members at home that have gotten the worst of the PTSD?
I'm glad you mentioned that, frankly, because PTSD first is post-traumatic stress disorder. And I can say this disorder is one of the easiest disorders that can happen to anyone, starting from childhood, adulthood, or any stage of your life that you're in. So in our community, we do really believe, of course, we would, inshallah, hopefully looking forward to do more research on how far or how many people are suffering PTSD. But from an estimate point of view, less than 35 years ago, we have been in civil wars. So most likely, the most people, most community that live, especially the elders, they're undergoing PTSD right now. They have this disorder. And how you can know that is, of course, like you mentioned, some of them are shown. They can show their symptoms. They're highlighted as the crazy people, and some are just continuing their life as it is, or they're just living their life. And if someone is earning their living or going out with their friends or just seem normal, it does not mean they don't have PTSD. You know, you cannot know how much the person is suffering inside their homes. And frankly, there's actually some research that people do, and that sometimes these PTSD disorders can be also transferred genetically to the children. And it's actually phenomenal how the parents, for example, go traumatic situation, and then they're facing problems or issues, and then now it's transferred to their children.
Especially if it's not been dealt with.
If it's not being dealt with. Yes. And we can assume and see that nobody actually dealt with PTSD. Like they haven't been treated from PTSD. So frankly, the community, it's they're facing in a crisis. They're in a very big crisis. The parents, the way they treat the children, it's very aggressive. For example, they're very negative about change or even new ideas. Yeah. They have a lot of mood swings. So with these symptoms, of course, the person would escalate. It will kind of, the level of it will go more if the person does not deal with it when it's near. Yeah. So that's why we turn to Khat, basically. That's where drugs comes in. Yeah. You can see the majority of the community now are chewing.
It's a scourge of the community.
A lot. And instead for them it's like it's a healing thing where they can get away from. Yes. coping mechanism as well, but instead is actually making their life worse, or even making the illnesses more severe.
Yes.
Yeah.
يا وارياي وارتنينكو بريغي هوري قاد كلو كلي ميغي جيرين با maanta waan ka yaab kaga siibiye maanta uu hadlayaa qaadka war abdow abdiyow war abdi war inkaari waa balkaalay kaalay barbal balkaalay sigaar noo soo iibi maanta reemaan ku yeedhoon dhuntan u qaadaatay oo sigaar noo soo iibi kiin buu ku noo soo iibi sigaar war maxay ka dhiman fiina aaminay آمنة نابل كالي تذكر إلى هاي ويقول تحاموني وانمو تذكر محي هاي تذكر مالك يمدي نابل كالي
أي حاج محاك هذا
نابل أرسان نصو كري ما أنت رمان كيوري أرسان نصو كري
واي
قولي نهار تانا محاك ما أنا قولي يكون نفسين بقى قولي المحوي هاي
وأبوك أنا شيطان يسكنا
شيطان الهيني أروح محي هاي نيو وايو مقاط بس نسيت المقاط من وين قاطك الله ور ما حد عين الله ما حد شيء انا حقيقي جيرس الله 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 ور حقيقي قوت الله ور ما حد عين ما حد شيء جوريا هلا هلا ور اي شكرا جوريا
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
أنا نسيت وأنا نسيت
ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم
ونسيت
والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما
And now that you touched on Khat, you recently released a short, if I can say, educational awareness video on Khat and the effects of Khat. So what you've touched on now is, of course, it is being used as a coping mechanism for some. It's not the best solution to people's problems, but it is also having so much more adverse effects on people, on their families, on society. If you could maybe, for those of our viewers who haven't watched the video, by the way, we're going to put in a link and everybody should check out that video. If you could tell us, do you deal with members or family members of people who have been directly affected by Khat use?
Every day. We see it every single day. Just now before I come to the studio, actually, I met this mother. She was a very old lady. She couldn't even walk. So I offered her to drop her off wherever she wants to go. And on our way there, I asked her, like, why are you out? You seem to not even being able to walk. Yeah. And she said, I'm looking for my son. And I said, what happened to your son? She said, I cannot find him for weeks now. So I'm out there looking for him. And I asked, what's wrong with your son? And she says, he chews Khat. He uses drugs. And I mean, I think all of us see and have family members that, or maybe friends, that has problems or that are mentally severe. And you know, we can say the word they use crazy, but actually someone who's very disturbed that even is in the hospital, maybe in the home. Yeah. So sometimes some people who are mentally disturbed or severely ill, they are locked in their homes and they're taken to a hospital. So I'm sure most of us, or anyone or every one of us in the community, have someone in the family or friend who is mentally ill, and that actually caused by Khat. And the reason I say it every day, it's because every day you would see someone who is suffering, either in the street or maybe even people who go to clinics, maybe someone, their family is drugging them to the psychiatrist so they could give them medication, or even to the ilaj, you know. So it's very sad stories you would hear sometimes from the community, and the only ones who are suffering are the families. They, even though they don't understand what's going on, but they do all their best and they try so hard to help their children or maybe their family members.
Yes. And would you say that most of this mental health issues or problems that people suffer, depression, anxiety, and who still use Khat as well, the Khat only highlights, only makes worse the underlying conditions that they have?
Well, at first, Khat is used as a coping mechanism because it's a stimulant drug, sort of. So when someone has it, not just even Khat, to be honest, there's other drugs that are even starting to people to get used to now, like marijuana, cocaine, heroin. These kind of drugs people start to use them now. So all these drugs are mostly stimulant drugs. So when someone is going through this depressed mood where they're very down, they have the drug, they suddenly feel happy, they suddenly feel that they own the world, and they're just talkative, they work so much. So obviously it doesn't last long. So they keep having that because they want to feel happy. You know, nobody wants to feel down or moody or irritable constantly. So what happens is, each time when the person uses a drug, any drug, usually especially Khat, they increase the amount because the amount they used to eat it now does not really give them that same effect. So they have to increase the amount over the years.
Or look for other drugs.
Or look for other drugs because this is sort of like a gateway drug for them. So what happens is the problem now comes back because most of them are families. If you can say, example, fathers, they have families. So what happens is, they pressured the mother, they pressured their wives in order for them to pay or give money, for example. The mother, you know, the condition, if the father is chewing Khat, they're not really being very much effective or not providing financially. Not working. Exactly. The mother would go out there and she'll be selling maybe tomatoes or vegetables on the street. So what happens is she's trying to provide for her children, and the father is right here, for example, wants to take away.
Taking money away.
Absolutely. And I have to say,
on their health, and their happiness.
Absolutely. And I have to say it's vice versa, by the way. It's not common, but there's also female who are opposite to that. There's also female who are addicted to Khat or drugs and who are actually being harmful to their families as well. It's very rare, but there are also female who have these problems. So what happens is, financially, emotionally, mentally, physically, there'll be problems in every sector in that family because one of the parents is chewing or addicted. Yeah.
It's very sad. Just as we close up, Asma, do you have any advice to our viewers, any tips for being aware of your mental health, taking care of your mental health, and also what advice would you give to those people who still think that mental health is a taboo?
There's so many advices, but what I can say for now is, the only thing I can say for now is start with yourself. You know, as a human being, we cannot differentiate, we cannot separate ourselves from others, because sometimes you are the one who is going through problems and we think the other person is going through it, the other person is the problem. So I would really advise anyone in the community, young people, old people, anyone, is that we normalize having mental illnesses or mental health issues. Because we're human beings, you know, maybe you have depression today, I can also have depression, you know. Someone else is having a certain disorder the other person can have. So we start with ourselves, learn or accept the fact that we can be ill as well, we can be mentally ill, and at the same time, we don't invalidate our own emotions. Like whatever emotions we have, whatever, because usually it starts with emotions and then thoughts, and then it goes with behaviors, and then we do behaviors, or we go for unhealthy things, for example. So we accept that, and then we kind of help ourselves learn more about our conditions, you know. Now everything is accessible nowadays. We have Google, small thing. Anything you type on, you would get a lot of information and research. So now all of us are educated, mashallah. Most of young people were educated. Go out there, read more about your situation, learn more about what mental health is, what depression is, what's anxiety, how you can deal with. So even if you cannot grasp certain topics or certain things, you can go and ask professionals. You can go to a doctor, you can talk to a friend who learned about it, for example. That's first thing. The second thing I can advise is accept others as who they are. Like, let's avoid judgment. You know, we see today one of our friends or one of the people that we know is mentally ill. We cannot highlight them to be dysfunctional.
We cannot marginalize them as well.
Exactly. For example, someone, because I see this commonly. For example, someone used to have bipolar or used to have any certain disorder, for example. They know, their friends know this person has this disorder. This person can be healed. They can get back to themselves.
Yes.
And we tend to see that we don't believe that someone, if they are sick, mentally ill, for crazy, that's the word they use, they cannot go back and be normal. And that actually puts that judgmental or that sense of the person not being able to move from where they were. So accept others and let's stop judging others. You know, only thing if we can do something for them is help them, support them, and do all we can for them instead of highlighting names and kind of calling them names.
Yeah, pointing them.
Yeah.
Pointing them out.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing to come on the show and giving our viewers education and knowledge more on mental health. It's quite an important subject. We don't talk enough about it. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for this episode of Her Associates. I've been your host, Hinda Hashi. It's been a pleasure to have you in the studio, Asma. Thank you very much. Until next time, remember that mental health is wealth. Goodbye.